Hi, welcome back for another color along video. This time I was using Mungyo oil pastel on a coloring page from Wildflower for Your Soul by Olga. Right away I started with a lighter yellow color because I wanted to color the iris flower in a deeper, darker purple tone. I wanted to create a gradient for the background. So after using the lighter yellow color, I proceeded to use a darker color. I think this one was probably look a little bit like yellow orange or golden yellow color. If you want to color along, you can use any color you want, but just to use color that are similar to each other so that it's easier to blend. Especially you are new to oil pastel like me. This was the first time I used oil pastel in a coloring book. Since I didn't have too much experience in oil pastel, I didn't want to be too adventurous. Before coloring this page, I had tried to use oil pastel to draw something like maybe 3 times. I think the first couple times they were horrible. So I don't think you will see those because likely I didn't keep those. So after I added the second color, I did go back to use the lighter yellow to overlap on the darker yellow color before I use cotton swab to smooth them out. I quite like this method by using the cotton swab to smooth out the oil pastel. Even though the cotton swab will lighten the color and rub off some color, but I can go back to add more and eventually it will build up to the color tone that I like. You do need to put down enough oil pastel on paper before you use the cotton swab, so that the cotton swab can smooth out the texture and fill in the white space. Here you can see that I continue to create the gradient by adding darker yellowish orange color. To avoid the build-up of oil pastel on the page to be overly thick, I use a lighter pressure where two colors overlap. I really like to use the cotton swab to smooth out the oil pastel because after the oil pastel was smoothed out, the surface is smooth and drier, and it's less likely the crumbs stick to my hand and smear the page. This page was easier for oil pastel because the graphic was bigger and it doesn't have small details. You don't have to extremely precise in the small area because you can always use the cotton swab to push the color closer to the line. Also, since I'm using oil pastel for this page, I wasn't looking for perfection. I simply wanted to try creating a more painterly effect on my coloring page. From yellow to orange color, I slowly added darker tones to create a smooth gradient. By the way, I've noticed that there has been a lot of talks about the overconsumption issues. I have seen many reaction videos criticizing people buying too much art supply and showing them on social media. But I don't think overconsumption is anything new. To be honest, I think I have been doing that since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I used to collect stickers and eraser that in all sorts of shapes and form, except I didn't show them on YouTube or TikTok videos. When it comes to overconsumption, I know part of my issues came from my struggles. I do use things that I bought, but maybe not all of them. After all, I buy faster than I use them. But at least I get to occasionally create videos and share them with you all. Hopefully, at least they could be useful. I know that shopping therapy may not be the best or the healthiest for struggle and depression, but at least I'm doing the best I could without harming other people. So why not? I'm not representing every other person's who has overconsumption issue. I'm simply saying maybe they all deal with issue differently. Maybe they all have struggle or they have different kind of motive and purpose behind all those videos that we don't know of. Maybe they just want to use a trend to make money, but if that works for them, why not? Who doesn't want to make money, right? I just feel like in recent years, our society, the people are so quick on judgment. Making a reaction video to call out somebody, to criticize, to shame them, to talk down about them, it just feels distasteful. If those people who are buying and collecting are struggling behind the scenes, making a video to call them out is definitely not the healthiest way or kindest way to help people who struggle. Let's face it, people who make those reaction videos, I don't think they are truly care about those people or our society. Otherwise, there are much more important issues in our country around the world that they can react to. Why is it so important to pass judgment on people who like to buy and collecting stuff? To simply put, some of the people who make these kind of reaction videos, they are piggybacking on the trend to get views, to get higher numbers, and to make money as well. It's almost like if you don't like how your neighbor talk or dress, you decided to call a town hall meeting and make a PowerPoint presentation about your neighbor. Back to this coloring page, after I completed the background, I started to work on the leaf with a light green color and slowly adding dark green color to create more interesting color combination for the leaves. Back to what I was saying, I know that overconsumption can be negatively influence our society or have an impact on our environment, but I think we have responsibility on things we do or things we buy, instead of just blaming people online or blaming the influencers. I know sometimes they argue that when you put something online, you open yourself up for criticism. But you can do it doesn't always mean you should. There are many things we can do in life, but doesn't mean we should do it. You will never feel better by stepping on other people. As a human being, I believe that when I have a choice, I want to always choose to be kind. You never know how big the impact it could be when you verbally or physically attack other people. I don't think everyone who appears online is always ready for criticism or personal attack. They may not have the emotional strength to handle being called out like that. When people say, once you put yourself in public eye, put yourself online, you are open up for criticism, they are rationalizing their own cruelty. It's their opinion. It doesn't mean the person who being called out is ready for that. Anyway, I didn't mean for this video to be so serious or depressing or stressful. I apologize for that. If you just want to see my coloring process, you can totally mute the audio and let the video play. I just thought coloring with oil pastel seems pretty straightforward. I don't know that I really have so much technique that I can share with you all, so I decided to take the opportunity to maybe address some issue that people have been talking about. Throughout this video, you probably can see that sometimes I change the angle of the cotton swab or change the angle depending on how big the area or how I want to blend them and push the color together. After I color the leaves, here I started to work on the stem of the flowers. I decided to use a lighter color to contrast with the darker color of the leaf. I know that my color choice isn't exactly realistic, but that's not the result I was after. I wasn't looking for something realistic. I just wanted the result look pleasant, or at least based on what I imagined. I did struggle a little bit when I colored the stems. Because the shape of the stems, they are narrower, and it was much harder to be accurate with my oil pastel or when I used the cotton swab to smooth it out. It wasn't perfect, but I was managed to get it done, and if you like to try oil pastel on your coloring books, I definitely recommend the books from this artist. The graphic was bigger and definitely easier for a medium like oil pastel. When I colored the iris flowers, I could have used a lighter purple color, but I wanted it to contrast from the yellow background. So I decided to use a darker purple color to start with. One thing I could have done was to take a picture before I started to put on oil pastel, because once I colored the first layer for the flowers, it covered all the lines that I couldn't see what's behind it. Luckily, this flower was simpler and I could refer it back to some of my earlier footage. Even though when I colored this page, I created shading for the graphic, but you probably noticed that I didn't use a single light source to create that shading. I noticed that I seem to do that quite a bit on my coloring page. Unless I saw a light source on the page, like a sun or table lamp. Otherwise, I simply create a simple shading for the graphic to make it look three-dimensional, but not exactly realistic. If I wanted to create something more realistic, I would have to sit down, take my time to map out all the light to see how it hit the objects on the page. Here I was adding darker purple color before I smooth out everything with the cotton swab. To be honest, while coloring this page, the biggest challenge was how to keep the background clean. If you have used oil pastel before, you're probably aware of sometimes oil pastel can be flaky depending on which brand you use. So most of the time while I was coloring this page, my hand was not touching the paper, and that was kind of challenging for me. It was a very different experience compared to coloring with color pencils. So after adding the darker tone and the middle tone for the flowers, I started to smooth it out with the cotton swab. I really do love using this method with oil pastel because the cotton swab really smooths out the texture and it's less likely for me to smear the page. I know there are other tools that you can use to smooth out oil pastel or blend them, but since I'm a beginner in oil pastel, I like to keep things simple. I think it's easier if I focus on one tool and master them instead of trying many different tools. That thought totally came from my personal experience. Because if you have watched some videos on my channel, you may have noticed that I have tried many different things. I cannot count how many art and craft related hobbies I have tried. No wonder I haven't mastered anything yet. But if you have any questions related to art and craft, feel free to ask, because I may know a little bit of that and able to help you out. After putting down the base layer, I started my refinement process. But unfortunately, I did this on the second day. I didn't realize that the oil pastel on the page would dry out so much, and the texture became different. The oil pastel felt dry, and if I rub it with the cotton swab, it became flaky. It is probably okay if you plan to do an oil painting, then you could have just add on thicker layer. But because this was on my coloring page, I didn't want a thick layer. I wanted to be able to close the book when I was done. It took me 4 or 5 hours total to get this page done, so I would recommend if you have time, finish your page in one section. Otherwise, you may deal with similar issues. I ended up using a thicker layer than I would prefer. In this situation, when I smooth out the top layer oil pastel, I have to go very light-handed to make sure I didn't put any pressure on the first layer. If you don't want to use cotton swab for the top layer, you can also use a lighter color to smooth out and to blend the oil pastel. Here I was using some darker greens that I used on the leaves because I thought the color on the stem looked a little too simple and boring. If I use a thin layer of oil pastel on my page, I probably could get away without spraying the page. But now, since I layer it more, I definitely have to spray this page before I close this book. Anyway, if you live in the United States like me, other than dealing with overconsumption, we are also dealing with the tariff issue. By the time I'm recording this video, I was aware that many countries have decided not to ship package to the United States. I can't predict for long term, but I think in the short term, we may have to deal with some shortage issues. I did buy many more art supplies than my usual in the last couple of months. I did buy some professional grade art supplies that were from my wish list, because those items are expensive to start with. I love my art supplies, but I just don't think I would buy them if the price go even higher. For example, I think I have purchased Derwent Light Fast color pencil and the Derwent Intense color pencil and the blocks, and also the Faber-Castell watercolor pencils. I think you can find a tons of reviews and videos on those color pencils. Do you still want me to do a review or a swatch video or a test video on those color pencils? I do love your suggestion before I make some videos because I'm slow to start with and it usually takes me about a week to make a video. So I want to make sure the video I make is actually helpful to you all. Back to this coloring page, you probably remember that when I colored the first layer of the flowers, everything was blended together and it looked like a mess. So now on the second layer, I try to add more highlights and shadow, try to separate those flower petals. It wasn't a plan when I did all of this. I just went with the flow and keep creating contrast and the separation. At first, I used a lighter purple color to do the highlight, but it still wasn't light enough. So at the end, I did use white in certain area to get the result I wanted. So throughout the video, you may have seen that I used my X-Acto knife to scrape on the page. What I learned was, if you accidentally go over the line and if you prefer a cleaner look, you should be able to scrape some off to give you a cleaner edges. I didn't do a lot of that on this page because what I wanted was something slightly more painterly and I wasn't looking for perfection. And as a friendly reminder, if you have some art supplies that you have wanted for years, and if you see them at a good price, I would recommend you to get it now instead of wait. I didn't realize how good it was for us in the United States when it comes to shopping. Now, with the tariff in place, I don't know what could happen. I think the price will likely go up. Based on the tariff number I see all over the place, we don't know how much it will go up. I would say at least 10 to 15% to be expected. Right now, you may temporarily catch a good deal because with this economy, many people are not buying. But then, once the current inventory is gone, you will definitely see new prices on the items you love. I would say you may still have a very narrow time frame to buy the art supplies that you love at a reasonable price. Unfortunately, when it comes to art supplies, we don't have many companies that make art supply locally. For example, I don't think any good color pencils are made in the United States. For watercolor, we do have Daniel Smith, but they are very expensive to start with, and we don't know that if they import their pigments. I'm hoping this situation is temporary, but it's not likely. Unfortunately, potentially, we may be cut off from the art supplies and tools we love. For example, I also love to purchase planners and stationery, and Hobonichi recently released their new lineup. Unfortunately, I don't think I will be buying this year because I don't know how much fees that I will have to pay on top of those already expensive products. I may just pick up a few items from the local retailers this year. To be honest, I probably have enough that I don't need to buy Hobonichi this year. Maybe I should do a video about 5 reasons why I'm not buying Hobonichi this year. I think it's time for me to look through my stash and see what I can use. I guess that's the silver lining of my overconsumption issue. Even if things go crazy, I probably still have enough to last me for years. Well, if you are watching this video from the future time, I hope things have changed and we are at a better place. Let me know your thoughts. Are all these changes affecting you? Do you feel like the social media has changed us in a negative way? I appreciate you listened to my rant today, and here I was nearly finished coloring this page, adding the last bits of shadow and highlight and some finishing touch. I know I could have cleaned up the edges more, but I was ready to take a break. This was my first time using oil pastel in my coloring book. Honestly, I thought it turned out better than I expected. Occasionally, I like to challenge myself, try different mediums, try different things. Challenges always help me grow, and it's a good way to learn new skill as well. But don't worry, there's no sponsor video, just me trying things and talking about life here. Thanks again, and I always appreciate you spend the time to watch my videos. Let's talk more in the comment area. Bye for now.